Hello, my name's Kirk Mylander, and this is Elected Essentials. I'm going to focus on the legal powers and impediments that affect elected officials. So my talk will focus on the things that you and people like you typically get tripped up on when you first start as a newly elected official. And then we'll focus on those close to your own duties. And then we'll pull back and we'll look at some of the issues that affect a city as a whole and some of the things that you can do in partnering with CIS to reduce claims and losses for your city, benefits not only your city, but cities statewide. So in case you don't know, what is CIS? I particularly like this graphic that's up on the screen where a group of people are catching one person, and the one person that's falling, that's your city, that's you. And the group of people are all the cities, other cities in the state that gather together and pool their resources so that when one person experiences a loss, or one city, all the others catch them. That's what we call risk pooling or insurance, and that's CIS. So CIS is really all the cities in the state gathering together to catch one another when they have a loss. And then once you get caught, you get to into that group below and take a turn catching other cities that have a loss. And that's how CIS works. I'm going to start by giving you some examples of the type of claims that we see against elected officials. And one of the things that CIS can do is it can aggregate, claims statewide, so not just from your city, but from all across the state, all the different areas. And then we can spot trends. We can see what type of claims are coming up more often, where we should provide more training, and point out those trends to you so that you can avoid them and not get caught in those trends and become an example in a talk like this. So some of them are someone abuses discretion. You can see that this comes up a lot. Examples of that are someone votes, they're accused of making a vote where they had a conflict of interest. That would be one example of that comes up kind of a lot. Or they went into executive session when they should not have been. Another large one is defamation, and those claims, just because they occur a lot doesn't mean that all of them have merit. So defamation can be someone, here's a real example, a citizen in town alleged that a city manager and city staff were defaming the citizen on Facebook. And another one is simply there were written materials prepared by staff that a city councilor went over during an open meeting, and those written materials defamed the citizen's business in town. So those are frequent examples. Malfeasance would be something like someone knowingly hid a conflict of interest and didn't disclose it. A mandatory duty breached is something akin to you're letting someone go. For a city council, it's typically the city manager, and not providing them the due process that they're entitled to before they're let go. And I'll talk more about that a little bit later. And then the other small ones are procedural errors. Those don't come up a lot. Or a unconstitutional enactment. So you know that some regulation you want to pass is prohibited by law, and yet you pass it anyway. Believe it or not, that does happen. And then discrimination, passing a particular provision that, let's say, would violate the rights of the disabled people in town. You fund some upgrades and do not fund the ADA required upgrades that go with it. That would be an example of that one. So next, you can see how the costs differ from the volume of the claims. So defamation was not the most frequent claim made, but all told, it's the most expensive of the ones that are alleged against public officials. So each defamation claim, if each claim was a rock, each defamation claim would be a heavier rock than, let's say, an unconstitutional enactment, which is very small. Totally, those don't cost us all that much. So we'll talk about avoiding defamation a little later on. So now I'm going to get into the common claims that we see against public officials, and I'm going to tell you some stories about real claims that have happened and have been alleged that CIS has defended through the city's insurance with CIS, and then how those turned out. So employment decisions, those just are typically a termination or a layoff. When they come against a city council or city councilors, typically what has happened is they've let a city manager go. Usually that's the only person that a council hires and fires. They've let a city manager go, and they are accused of either not giving the person due process, or the people in town are just really upset and they don't want that person to be fired. This will dovetail with number 2, defamation. So let's say someone is fired, and defamation can be simply explaining to the public why the city manager who was in place before you got elected was a terrible, horrible, corrupt person, and you had to fire him or her on your very first day as a councilor. So that could cause a couple claims. Defamation for your going onto the news and explaining why they are horrible and what they did that's horrible and why you had to fire them. And then it could also cause an employment claim where you are sued for firing them. A real example of that was with a city that's in the larger metro area, although I'm not going to be more precise because I don't want you to guess and figure it out, where I got a call. I was taking pre-loss calls where we give employment advice to cities at no charge, and I got a call from a mayor who had just been elected. In fact, it was the end of December, between the week between Christmas and New Year's, and this mayor calls me, mayor-elect, and says, hey, Kirk, I want to let you know that we're going to fire our mayor. The mayor's calling saying he's going to fire the city manager. And I said, you were just elected, right? And he says, yeah, well, congratulations, but you don't start until January 1. He said, oh yeah, so I'm just going to ask for his resignation now. And then if he doesn't resign, then we'll fire him. He said, well, your power comes from acting as a group, and you're just one. You got to get the rest of the council to vote with you. And he said, I've been talking to him on the phone. We've all been talking, and we have it all figured out. Now, that could also be a public meeting violation, so a little red flag on that part of it. So I told him, listen, really, you need to give the mayor, I keep saying that, the city manager, an explanation of what they're doing wrong, give them some time to improve, give them some training if they need it, and then if they still fail to improve after you've done that, then you look at letting them go. But just to come in and let someone go on the first day before they've even ever worked for you, that's not going to go well, and it could cause a claim. It would be difficult to defend. And who ends up paying for it? All the other cities in the state. So I explained all that, and the mayor didn't care. He said, this person has to go. It's the whole reason I ran, and he was let go. What happened is that city had this public meeting where they put the decision on the record that they were terminating the city manager, and it was a circus. It was the place was packed. People are trying to heckle and cheer, and not cheer happy, but like jeer and shout down the counselors as they're voting. This is all on YouTube to this day. And they did fire him, but shortly after that, as soon as 6 months were up, can you guess what happened? That's right, they were recalled. All the people that voted to terminate the city manager were recalled right when the 6-month grace period ended, where they're not allowed to be recalled. So that's a couple examples for employment and defamation. The third one, causing a hostile work environment for staff, or what I like to call, in reality, doing the city manager's job instead of your own. And this is often outside the scope of your authority. I'll explain what I mean by all of that. So there's a pattern. It's happened many, many times in Oregon, all throughout the state, not in just one area, where someone is running for city council or for mayor, and they have been successful in their private life. They've had maybe they're a business owner in town. They've done well, and they've really led, they're the CEO of their own business, and what they say goes. If they make a decision and say, jump, people say how high, and that works. And they've been successful. They're good at it. And they run for city council or mayor and kind of bring that same attitude into the city council or mayor's job. And the fact is, even the mayor is not the CEO of the city. And they do not have the power to say, jump and how high, and you're hired, you're fired, do this, do that. All their power comes from acting as a group with the other counselors, and if they have a mandate, they need to convince a majority of the other counselors to pass resolutions or ordinances to affect their mandate. They can't just unilaterally go around, let's say, micromanaging the city staff. And that is what will happen. So someone comes in and they're a new mayor, and they walk into City Hall and they're very proud. They got reason to be proud. And they say, hey, we're going to move your office over here, and we're going to change your duties. And the staffers feel like this is a hostile work environment. And they don't mean they're being discriminated against based on a protected class. They just mean that they are being stressed out, and this is awful. And the way they push back against this new mayor is they file a hostile work environment claim. And this happens with some frequency, which is why it's on this list. And what will occur is the city manager will let the CIS know that this claim has been filed. And the difficulty with them is the elected official, it's not in the scope of their authority to manage the city staff. That is left to the city manager. So the cause of this claim is the mayor acting outside the scope of their authority. And the city does not have to defend the mayor or a city councilor when they're acting outside the scope of their authority. So all to say, if you act outside the scope of your authority and micromanage city staff, and they say this is a hostile work environment and file a lawsuit, it is quite possible that you will have to defend yourself in court. And that will be very expensive, and it would be much better for everyone if you let the city manager do the managing of the staff. And if you've got concerns, you can voice them to the city manager. You can manage the city manager, and they send out all the directives to the staff. And then you pull back and you really focus on the direction of the city as the whole, and leave the managing to the city manager. It will be good for your city, and it will be good for your pocketbook, because you won't have to pay for your own defense. So fourth, I alluded to a failure to provide due process when terminating. We at CIS provide lots of help with this. Really, what this means, due process, is it's like when you take property from a landowner to widen a road. Before you take their property, you have to give them due process, which is simply written notice and an opportunity to be heard, opportunity to tell their side of the story. And it's the same with employment. Public employees have a property interest in their job, and you can't take it from them unless you provide them due process notice. You give them a piece of paper that says, you know, we are considering terminating you for XYZ, and then an opportunity to be heard. The paper says, your chance to tell your side of the story before we make a decision is on X date and time with the city manager, or if the council is going to do it, it's typically in an executive session with the whole council and then the city manager there to explain, you know, why they should keep their job if that's the case. And that is a typical scenario. If you don't provide due process, the termination can get undone, can be reversed. So when we provide, you know, help for you on this, we want to help you ensure that your decisions stick, that they stay and are upheld in court. All you have to do is call pre-loss, and the info is at the end of this presentation, and we will guide you every step of the way through ensuring that due process is provided. So the fifth common claim, removing disruptive citizens. You have probably, in fact, everyone who's watching this, I'm sure, has at one time or another either wanted to remove a disruptive citizen from a public meeting or has wished that whoever's in charge of the meeting would remove a disruptive citizen from the meeting. It's just universal. It happens. And the kind of the tipping point of where, you know, how much does someone have to be disruptive in order to be removed is they have to actually take the floor from the speaker so that whoever currently has the floor can't talk anymore, and the meeting is halted because that person is being so disruptive. So, for example, there's one I'm thinking of where someone was sitting in the meeting and they were hemming and hawing and rolling their eyes and going, shh, and doing all that kind of thing as someone was talking, and they obviously disagreed with the person who was doing the talking. And so they were making a bunch of noise, and they were a distraction, but they weren't interrupting the speaker. They weren't causing the speaker to stop talking. And what happened here is during a break, the mayor had the police chief approach the person and say, we would like you to voluntarily leave because you were being a distraction during the meeting. And the person said, am I being forced out? And the police chief said, no, we're just asking that you will voluntarily leave during the break. What happens if I don't? Well, then we'll have an issue. And so the person voluntarily left, and then they sued. And they said they were kicked out of this public meeting when they, and that was an interference in their ability to participate and their free speech rights. And the police power was behind pressuring them to leave. And it was hard to argue that it wasn't. I mean, the police chief kind of said, we're going to have an issue if you stay. And it was the police asking them to leave with the threat of some unknown action if they didn't leave. And the key was they never took the floor from the speaker. So that is one where the person did not do enough to actually remove them from the meeting. Open meeting laws and executive sessions. I'm not going to go into that one in detail because that's one that others will cover in their presentations. But just let me say, listen to your city attorney on that. There have been many problems that could have been avoided if a council had just closely listened to their city attorney. And then be cautious of kind of daisy chain emails or phone conversations where one swings into another, and they come around and you've had a digital meeting without noticing it for an open session, so no one can see government doing its business. So I'm just going to flag that one for you. It's worth flagging, no matter how many times you've heard it today. Using office for personal gain. So this is one, and this is another true story where someone ran for mayor, and they won, and they were a small business owner in town, and they had a body shop. And it was right down this particular town, and this one was not in the metro area, just so I'm not trying to help you figure out where it was, by the way, but it wasn't in the metro area. And this body shop was on a street in town, and this town was just big enough that its main thoroughfare downtown had parking meters. And this newly elected mayor liked to park his personal car, which was very nice, right out in front of his shop in one of the metered spaces. And the meter reader came walking down the street, ticketing cars whose meter was expired. And it got to the mayor's shop, and she started writing a parking ticket for the mayor. And the mayor sees this out the window, goes rushing out there, bursts out there, and he says the words that you never, ever want to hear yourself say, and those are, "Do you know who I am?" Those 6 words, I mean, if you hear yourself say that, you need to backtrack, because like it's about to go really bad for you if you hear yourself saying those words. So he says, "Do you know who I am?" And she is, scared, and he's a big guy. And he starts to chew her out for writing this parking ticket, and this is his business, and he's the mayor, and he's extremely upset. She's in tears, and she leaves. She does leave the ticket there. He tears it up, and she leaves, and she goes back to City Hall, and she tells the city manager what happened, which is exactly what she should have done. And then the city manager does exactly what he should have done. He calls the mayor, and the next time they're both in the office, the city manager meets with him and he says, "Mayor, I heard this story. Is this true?" And he's like, "Yes, can you believe it? She wrote me this ticket." He's like, "Mayor, you can't be asking that the staff make exceptions for you in applying the law and rules and regulations just because you're the mayor. That's unethical and unlawful." And the mayor was upset but calmed down, wouldn't apologize. And he was still mad enough that he said he wanted the meter reader fired. And again, the city manager did the right thing and said, no, we're not firing her. And he made sure that the mayor wouldn't ever get near that particular meter reader and wouldn't send her back down that street again. And nevertheless, the meter reader heard that the mayor was talking to amongst the city staff and saying he wanted her fired. And she heard that and just felt like not assaulted is quite the right word, but felt all this pressure, and like work was just too stressful with the mayor out to get her and telling people that, and so she quit. She sued, and that's another one where there's not really a good way for us to defend that, because like it's true, he did everything and was proud of it. And so we had to settle that one. It cost us about $30,000. And if something happens like that, we're going to end up having to settle it too in your area. So just make sure you stay away from those. And most of all, make sure that you never say, "Do you know who I am?" So then our last one, conflict of interest claims. Another true story. This is one where the elected officials in this town frequented one of the two primary bars in town, and they went there, some of them before and after the city council meetings. It's kind of, the city council meeting was almost an interlude to the night's revelry, we will call it. And so some regulations and zoning came up in town, and the other bar in town felt that the zoning laws were being applied to them more strictly than to the bar where all the elected officials went, and that they were being treated unfairly. And then when they made this allegation, the elected officials talked about it during the meeting, and the bar number 2 felt that their business was being slandered during the open meeting, and they made a claim about that as well. And then they also said that an executive session was improperly used so that the city council could talk about bar number 2 in secret, away from the public, and that it didn't qualify for a public meeting. All of that together had to be defended and ended up costing over $100,000 to settle. So that's just another issue where a bunch of things come together at once. You can't even have the appearance of looking like someone is getting special treatment just because they are close with or know city councilors. So I'm going to shift gears just a little bit and go over coverage for ethics claims. So I'm happy to tell you that if someone were to file an ethics claim against you, CIS provides coverage for that. It's $7,500 per person per year, and then there's a limit of $15,000 for every entity, city per year. And the reason we do that is because there are entities where a council is deeply divided. Let's say there's 7 people and it's kind of a 3-4 split. And someone on this side doesn't like the way someone on this side is going to vote, and so they file an ethics complaint about this person, saying they have a conflict of interest, they shouldn't vote on this. Then this person files an ethics complaint about this person, who files an ethics complaint about this person, and pretty soon you've got 7 ethics complaints against city councilors in one town, and they are all filed by fellow city councilors. And that's not really an ethics problem, that's a politics problem. And so that's why we have a cap on that. I would encourage you to be very wary of filing ethics complaints against fellow councilors unless you've got really documented evidence to show that what you're alleging actually happened, and I'd encourage you to speak with counsel too before doing that. So I'm also now going to go over, kind of like I said earlier, pull back and talk about some of the claims that hit cities as a whole instead of just elected officials. So in all the claims that CIS defends on behalf of cities, what's bad is employment cases. Those have been a challenge, but they have declined in severity over the last few years. We're doing well with the programs that we offer and working with you, so we're very happy about that. What's worse is law enforcement filing employment cases. For all the controversy over law enforcement right now, people still are defensive of and care about the members of law enforcement in their town that they feel keep them safe. And they will be defensive, a jury will be defensive of someone who's being terminated, who has been a law enforcement officer in town for 10 or 15 years, has a clean personnel file and had one instance, maybe off the job, that caused them to get fired. The jury will side with that person. I've seen it happen, it will happen again. The one I'm thinking of, the jury awarded 10 years of front pay, like pay that the person would have got if they had stayed on the job, They made $75,000 a year, so it was a verdict of $750,000 plus attorney fees. It was about $1 million total, and all that could have been avoided if they would have followed the pre-loss advice and made sure that the reasons they were being terminated were investigated and documented, instead of just kind of saying, no, this person has to go right now because of something that happened off duty. So law enforcement employment claims, those are worse, but the worst has become claims against law enforcement, not by law enforcement. These days, those really are a problem. What is the most expensive is jail death claims. Fortunately, most cities don't have jails, but a few do, and those are very expensive. And then claims of excess force, and we're not talking about scuffling with protesters or rioters. We're talking more about shooting deaths, where there is a conflict with someone who is resisting arrest typically, or we see that they're, oftentimes it's a car in Oregon, not like a gun, but the person is using a car as a weapon toward law enforcement, and they are shot and die, and their family or estate brings a claim. Those have been hugely expensive. And so we're doing a lot with offering kind of best practices, advice, and a conference just for law enforcement by CIS, all to try to help reduce these kinds of claims. So employment claims cost, because those are still occurring at a fairly high rate, even though the severity has come down. Just so you know, the legal cost of a claim that does not go into litigation, so a lawsuit isn't even filed, but the person makes a claim, we're looking at $50,000. If it goes to litigation, then the average cost is more like $75,000. And then if it's an employment claim by a police officer, then the employment claim is close to $115,000. So you can see a huge jump between a claim that is not in litigation and won by an officer. But even non-litigated claims are expensive for us to defend. So here's a chart where I want to show you kind of the statewide trend, where the total claims you can see on the left have remained somewhat stable between 2014 and 19. We're at about the same volume. There have been a few ups and downs. But when you look at the average claim cost of employment claims, we're definitely on a downward trend, and we're very happy about that. Cities have done a great job working with our pre-loss team and our H2R team, which provide both legal and HR advice to help you institute best practices and avoid employment claims. So we want to really encourage you to keep that up. That downward trend is great, and it helps us keep rates flat. So fewer increases or no increases by keeping these numbers down. And that's good for you. It gives you more money to spend on the things that you want to spend money on instead of insurance. So one of the ways that we provide services that help you, where we can partner with you to avoid employment claims, is through our pre-loss program. And that is, we have now 3 attorneys whose full-time job is to talk to cities, and we also talk to counties, when they have someone that they are probably going to fire or suspend. They can call and they can get really top-shelf legal advice for no cost. So you can call, you can talk to a pre-loss attorney, and there's no meter running. I mean, how often can you do that in life? And it's a great benefit. Our goal is to work with you to develop a strategy to minimize the likelihood of a claim or a lawsuit, and yet still have you effectuate the change that you need. So sometimes you might not get to make the change as soon, but by documenting things, the change that you want to make will last longer and will be more impervious to legal challenge. What we have to deal with is what we call the other F word, and that's fair. So our pre-loss attorneys, we want to make sure that a termination will pass legal scrutiny, but also that it appears fair. So to the outside world, it looks like the person actually deserved to be fired instead of they made one mistake off duty and they were terminated out of nowhere. That would not look fair, and it's why juries give million-dollar verdicts to plaintiffs. So H2R is our human resources advice program, and what it is that's different is instead of focusing on kind of the point at which someone's going to be terminated, it focuses on the whole life cycle. So from hire to onboarding to retention and training to moving someone out, potentially they're retiring. So hire to retire, just the whole life cycle. And we have a large group of trainings, online lessons, and then consultants who can all help with that and your HR practices. And so just so you know, these programs are documented to save money. We did a study, and there was a lower cost when pre-loss touches a claim. So $26,000 on average. If pre-loss is involved, the value of the claim goes down. So on those past charts, you could see how the number of claims was similar year to year, but the value of the total claims was going down. That's because pre-loss brings the value down. Claims are more defensible when you get good legal advice, and you can get it for free with us. So there's no easy answers to the challenges that you face as elected officials, that we face in trying to help you avoid employment claims, but there is something you can do. So basically, just go back after this session today to your city and let your staff know that you want them to use H2R and pre-loss. And then for you yourself, just remember not to say those 6 words. You don't expect anyone to know who you are. So that's it. Again, my name's Kirk Mylander, and I'm the General Counsel at CIS. And feel free to reach out to us. Simple email, preloss@cisoregon.org. And we're here to partner with you and help you be a success. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. So obviously, we don't have Kirk Mylander here today. Kirk is a really good friend and colleague of both Jamie and I's. And when he did the pre-recording for us, he made it clear that there would be a few days where he wouldn't be able to be here for live Q&A. And he asked us to kind of pitch hit for him. So if you have any questions related to Kirk's stuff, we will do our best. If we can't answer them, we are in contact with Kirk and his entire team daily, so we can forward those questions on and make sure you get them answered. We're also happy. It's been a long day. We know that, and most of you have stuck with us, so congrats on that. But if you have questions about anything you heard today, if you want to use this time, we're happy to kind of field any of those last questions as well.
Hi, thank you. I had a question. He was talking about the police chief that removed somebody from a meeting, and I was thinking with our new Zoom type meetings that people can be removed basically by kicking them out of the room pretty quickly. And is there any recommendations around that?
So I will double check with Kirk, but from my experience, what I would say, as long as you follow the same general principles that Kirk kind of talked about, is that you want to make sure that they are in fact actually breaking one of your rules or distracting the meeting so that you can't actually conduct a business. General practices, you want to give them a warning. So, let's say you've got somebody who won't utilize mute and for some reason you can't mute it themselves, they won't just stop talking. You're going to want to give them a warning. You're in violation of our council rules of procedure. If you don't stop, I'm sorry, we're going to have to unilaterally kick you out of this meeting, something like that. So make sure they are either violating your rules of procedure or taking over the meeting so you can't conduct it. Give them a warning first, and then I think it would be acceptable to essentially, kind of kicked them out of the Zoom platform. Any other questions?
I don't see any other questions. We have a comment that they highly recommend using CIS services.
I would echo that. I don't know if you heard Lisa, she would highly recommend CIS services. We use them at the league ourselves, so I use them regularly as a resource. They're great. They also, which Kirk didn't advertise, but if you've got some particular issues that you have needed some training on, so they do some stuff on harassment training as well. They're just a general great resource for anything you have HR related. And CIS and LLC really do work hand in hand partnership. Jamie and I were working with CIS earlier this summer with one of our cities who was experiencing some difficulty. So we worked with them to do a facilitation. So they really are your partner. Your dues get you a lot of value for your money, and I think that you should use them if you can. Any final questions or comments you want to share from the group, Lisa?
So a really excellent presentations. Thank you. Someone asked if we will make the PowerPoint presentations available for download.
We can do that. So what we will do is we'll make everything available in January. What I will encourage you, since I have your undivided attention, is that you can't see Lisa. She's off screen. She's our program manager. She kind of runs our training program here at the LOC. And Jamie and I obviously do some of the trainings. If at any point in your career or your tenure with the city, if you think that you or your city need some type of training, if it's on one of the topics we covered today or something else, please feel free to reach out to the league and ask for assistance. There's a lot of stuff we can do. We provide trainings on all kinds of topics that we haven't covered here today. If you need goal setting, if you need facilitation services because you're a council in crisis, all of those things we can at least give you a quote and we can provide helpful resources for you. And last thing, because it is one of the primary programs that Jamie and I work on, is the member inquiry log. So if you, as part of your dues, if you have any question whatsoever and you don't even know where to start, you can email me or Jamie. We won't give you legal advice. We'll get pretty close, if I'm being honest. But we will find you the resources you need to answer your questions. We can find you model ordinances. We can find you sample policies. If you've got a question that you want to ask the Ethics Commission and you want us to help you frame the question so it goes right, we can do that. Just essentially what we'd like you to do, if you take anything from today, is that if you have a question and you don't know where to start with us. And if we aren't the person who can give you the answer, we will be able to find you someone who can. So in terms of, if you take anything aside from the educational component today, it's to please remember that both LOC and CIS are really here to help you. We work for you on behalf of you, and our mission is to make your lives, both personally in your capacity as elected officials or city managers, and the lives of your cities better in any way that we can.
And considering deaths in sobering city centers, are those also considered jail death claims?
I don't know the answer to that question, so what I'm going to do is, it's my understanding that we have your information who asked the question, and we will send you an email within the next 48 hours after I get that information from Kirk. It's a good question, and we will get you that answer as soon as we can.
Okay. One more. Hypothetically, city staff is participating in the city manager hiring process, and after several attempts to hire a city manager fail, the mayor vets the city staff member to be the city manager. Is that legal, ethical, or grounds for conflict of interest?
So I'm not necessarily sure I understand the question. So if you're looking for a city manager and you've gone through a couple hiring processes, and you don't have anybody, and there's an internal candidate or an internal person that you want to promote to city manager, or you want to even make them an interim city manager, typically what you'll see in personnel manuals is a process for some type of internal promotion. Although the exception to that is city managers generally are on a contract basis, so they specifically have negotiated contracts with terms. What I would tell you is if that's where your city finds itself, that would be a great time to call CIS, like Kirk mentioned, and work through that problem with them. They can help give you some guidance on best practices. They can pull your personnel manual and make sure that you're doing everything you need to do to make sure that the city is protected from its legal principles. But that's a perfect example of when you would want to call one of CIS's pre-loss attorneys, and they'd help you work through that issue. Have any other questions, Lisa?
I am not seeing any other questions.
Okay. With no other questions, Jamie and I want to thank you for spending an entire day with us, particularly since it required you to sit at a computer screen and you weren't allowed to network with one another. We hope that you gain some valuable information, and we would ask if you're going to take 2 things away from today, and only 2 things. It's to remember who you can call when you need help. First, you can call Jamie and I, our colleague Colton, who's another attorney at the league, or any of league staff, and you can ask us for help. You're certainly welcome to email us at any time, and we will do our best, like I've said a couple times now, to get you the answers that you need. The second friend that you have is CIS. For any employment law issues you have, any of your insurance needs, you should really work with CIS. Both LOC and CIS are here to serve cities. We're here to serve elected officials and city staff. Our goal is to make sure that we make your lives as easy as possible and that we help you in any way we can. So again, if you take anything from today, if you can't remember the specifics and you can't remember the details, please just remember that you don't have to be experts. You have experts on staff, and you have experts at the League of Oregon Cities and CityCounty Insurance who are here to help you.
As a council member, is it allowed for council members to talk to city employees? Not telling them what to do or how to do their job, just having a discussion or even asking questions of them about how they do their job.
Sure. So as a city councilor, it certainly would be permitted to say, how's your day going? Hi. I think it's good to have that, rapport and just being friendly. However, I think it's really important to realize that you may have an influence on somebody you don't think you have. I know personally, I get very easily intimidated by elected officials. And so your innocent question of just, hey, I'm just curious about what your job is, what do you do day to day, might come off as exerting influence on that staff member. The safest thing, if you have questions about how city offices run or what certain staff do, which is a legitimate concern, is to ask your city manager or your city administrator. That is somebody that you can ask questions to, and they will be the best person to start with so that they can say, sure, counselor, let me report back to you. And they might feel comfortable having that one-on-one conversation with their staff member. But remember that it's always important when it comes to staffing issues to go directly through the city manager. Do we have another question, Julie?
No more in the chat right now, and I don't see any hands.
Okay. If after this broadcast you think of something on this topic or any other topic that we talked about, or even anything that we didn't touch upon but is related to your position or with the city, please, please, please just either pick up the phone, give us a call. Right now, with us working remotely, the best way is really through email. You can either email myself or Patty directly, or just email the main LOC line. It will get to one of us. If it's a CIS question, we can definitely just forward it on to them or have them reach out and respond to you. Even if it's not an LOC or CIS question, we can, like I said about the ethics stuff, we can still point you in the right direction or let you know who to talk to. If you haven't had a chance yet, I highly recommend you check out our website. There are a lot of kind of FAQs and models and guides on there that can kind of help you with your city business.
In this era of Zoom meetings, can a person be removed simply by muting them? We recently had a person drop an F-bomb while someone else was speaking. What would we have to do before we mute someone or remove them in a Zoom meeting?
That's a good question. So you're going to want to follow the same procedures you would use if you were trying to remove somebody from a physical meeting. So you're going to want to make sure, again, that you kind of outline your conduct expectations at the beginning of a meeting. So I've seen a lot of, mayors, kind of almost have a prepared speech about, the council has some rules of conduct that we expect ourselves to do, and there's no cussing, there's no swearing, we wait till you speak. In the Zoom context, is that you're muted. Please know that if you are unmuted and you haven't been called on, we're going to go ahead and mute you as staff as soon as we can to eliminate background noise. If somebody's giving public comment and they're kind of dropping F-bombs left and right, I think what I always tell you is be a little bit careful, remember, because they do have some First Amendment protections, and sometimes the F word, as offensive as it can actually be considered protected speech. But generally speaking, the Zoom platform doesn't really change anything. If you were going to have a process in place for removing somebody from your physical in-person meeting, you would want to kind of create a similar process for the Zoom meeting. So if that's muting them involuntarily, if it's kicking them out of the meeting, just make sure you follow the same process. You've got rules in place, you've got procedures where you treat everybody the same, and your chair is giving people warnings before they take any official action to remove somebody from the meeting, and you should be safe. Just review those with your city attorney just to make sure all the kind of I's are dotted and T's are crossed, and you should be good.
Okay, we have another one. It's kind of a two-part question, so I'll go ahead and ask the first part first. Is it defamation for the city manager to make unsubstantiated claims about a city councilor being the reason why the prior city manager resigned?
So that sounds like a really specific question about defamation that I don't think that I can answer. I don't specialize in defamation. What I would suggest, if you want, I'm happy to have that question and take a look at it and see if I can point you in some direction. I can't give you specific legal advice, but what I will do is I will have Denise kind of send me that email, and I'll see if there's any resources I can send to you directly next week.
Okay, here's part two of the question, a separate question. Is a city councilor factually pointing out a city manager's or mayor's honest failure to perform duties or to follow set procedures a defamation or creating a hostile work environment?
Again, that's going to be kind of a fact-specific situation. I'll have Denise send me that one, and I'll give you some pointers. I won't be able to give you legal advice. We're not allowed to do that per se, but I'll see if I can't find you some resources that may be useful for that specific question, and I'll email that one to you privately.
Okay, we have another question in the queue. Where does a mayor or councilor's freedom of speech end and defamation begin?
It's tricky. So I'm not a defamation expert. I'm not going to be able to answer a lot of these offline or online at the moment. I will tell you that once you make yourself a public figure, your protections are not nearly the same as a private citizen when it comes to things like defamation, slander, and libel. It's a lot higher burden for you to prove those things once you are in public office. It's not the same thing when you're a private citizen who's not considered kind of a publicly known figure.
Okay, we have another one in here. For a Zoom call, can we have everyone muted until called on?
Yes, that's typically what we recommend, to be perfectly honest. In fact, I believe, although technology and I aren't the best of terms, I think you actually even have the ability, at least in the Zoom platform, when you set up the meeting, so when you actually set up the meeting itself in Zoom, that everybody is muted upon entry. I think that's even a feature that Zoom has.
That is the last question in the chat, and I don't see any raised hands.
Excellent. So on behalf of everybody at the League of Oregon Cities and CityCounty Insurance, I really want to thank everyone for attending. I know that it's not great to sit at a computer screen all day. You also didn't actually have the chance to network with one another, which I think is sometimes the most valuable part of training exercises like this. But I do want to thank you for registering. I want to thank you for staying with us all day. And more importantly, whether you're an elected official or a city official, I want to thank you for the commitment and the time and energy you're putting in towards your citizens in your community. I myself am a huge fan of local government. I've worked for it for over 20 years, and I really think that what we can accomplish in local government is amazing, and it's attributable to people like you. Even though I haven't met you, the fact that you sat here all day, to me, indicates a strong desire to learn and serve, and I admire the heck out of that. Going forward, if there's anything that you think the League of Oregon Cities or CityCounty Insurance can provide you, I strongly encourage you to reach out to us. We are here as membership organizations to serve you, to make your lives easier, and to help you ensure that your cities are successful.
Can counselors call pre-loss or only staff? And if a counselor's call, are those conversations confidential?
So you can call. Generally speaking, what CIS does is they're providing assistance to the employer, which is generally speaking the council. So if you remember what Kirk said, if you're upset with, say, a public works official who's not doing something, that's probably where you need to be talking to your city manager, because your city manager supervises the public works official. But if you've got concerns about the city manager, CIS would be the place for you to start. What I think the best rule of thumb is, don't ever not call because you don't think that we can help you. The worst thing you're going to hear from us is, I'm sorry, that's not within our purview, we can't provide assistance. It's better to call and be told, we can't help you, here's who can, than to not call and we could have helped you out a lot. So when in doubt, just give us a call. The people you're going to primarily talk to at CIS are going to be Kirk Mylander, who you saw on the video, Tamara Jones, or Katie Comer. And all of us, I know all three of them, I work with them pretty regularly, each maybe a couple times a week. They'd rather you call and ask than to just sit around and think that they can't help. That's usually the best course of action I would recommend taking.
One more question came in. Do you have a sample city manager evaluation?
I don't have a set city manager evaluation, but I have questions that you can consider asking. So what I'll do is I will have Julie send me that email, and I will include that sample questions that you can ask. I'm also almost 100% positive I was asked this question a couple months ago, and I think I may have even found some evaluation processes that other cities use that I can send to you as well. Generally speaking, kind of a tip, if I don't have a model for you, I'm usually capable of finding samples from other cities, and what we try and do at the League is we try and focus on those cities who have attorneys that we work with regularly, so that we know that while we may not have lawyers have reviewed every piece of it, the policy or guide or principle that we're sending you was vetted by attorneys that we work with regularly at the League. So I will get you guys out something in the next 2 days with some guidance on that. Okay, so seeing no questions, we will take just a few last quick moments of your time to do a couple things. First and foremost, to thank you for joining us, particularly if you're someone who managed to stay on all day. Sitting at a computer screen is not an ideal way to spend 6 or 7 hours of your life, but hopefully you gained some valuable information. You learned some information about who you can contact, me and Jamie here. If you have questions or you need assistance, we're happy to help in any way we can. For those of you that are newly elected, welcome to the job. We hope it's everything you hope it has, hope you want it to be. For those of you that have been in elected office for a long time, thank you for continuing to serve. And for those of you that are city staff, thank you for your commitment to your community. And as former staff persons ourselves, you'll always have a special place in our hearts. The League of Oregon Cities is here to help you, and what's important to me today is to remind you that so is City County Insurance, and you just saw Kirk Mylander, the CIS General Counsel. We are both essentially entities that were created by you as cities, and we are here to serve you, whether it's to answer your questions, provide you model documents, give you legal advice, particularly CIS in terms of their employment law advice. CIS also provides risk management services. They act as your insurance carrier for the most part. The League will lobby on your behalf at state and federal level. We put on training programs like this. We also do in-person conferences if we're not in the middle of a global pandemic and under stay-at-home orders and social distancing requirements. So please continue to use us, keep us in your toolbox, and know that if you ever need us, we are here to help. And Jamie, you want to have any closing statements too?
No, just thank you for attending. Thank you for being willing to learn. And if you have any questions at all, again, Patty mentioned it a dozen times. I'll mention it a couple times more. Please just reach out, email, call. We're here to help you.
And on behalf of the entire League staff, if you're new, you've probably not met anybody except for me and Jamie virtually today. But on behalf of the entire League of Oregon City staff, I feel confident in saying that we wish you all the happiest of holiday seasons. Please stay happy, please stay healthy, please stay safe. And with a little luck in 2021, we'll actually be able to meet again in person. Thank you, everyone.